Well, everyone, Shabbat Shalom, and you may be seated. And so we're gonna begin today with a question that I don't think's ever been asked before. How does the magic arm of Pharaoh's daughter reach all the way to the birds of the air on the Sermon on the Mount? Are you perplexed? Okay. Sit with that for a few moments. It'll become clear as we go through. Okay. When we're in the circle for a cappella services, I like to do a little bit more of an interactive study or sermon. I call it sort of like a sermon study, and so we'll do some of each. And what we're going to be doing is getting back to our theme. Last few weeks we focused on integrity and in the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to get back to our theme on the kind of the Jewish basics. So we've Torah and prayer, and let's get back into Torah study and do some Torah study together. Together. So what we want to do is just enter into our Parsha. Now, I hope you guys have been reading the Daily Devar. Some of you guys have been doing the Daily Devar. We've got if you haven't seen it, we've got the new bookmark out with Shemot, and Viva drew a nice picture there. It's kind of cool on the splitting of the sea. And if you're getting the text messages at 6 a.m., they come out every day, and you can listen. I've been listening to it or read it. You can text this number on the back to get those if you have not already done so. Those are out front. And the thing with the Daily Devar is that, it's so cool. Like at home group, it's like, oh, the Daily Devar and this and that. And there's a Daily Devar WhatsApp thread. If you're interested in talking about the Daily Devar over that way, do it that way. And if you're behind or you haven't started or you missed a month, don't worry about it. Just start today. Or wait, it doesn't start today. Start tomorrow. And just jump right in. And don't worry about trying to get caught up, because you get caught up over the time. So that's the idea. But the thing about Torah study is that we don't study Torah alone in Judaism. There's an interesting passage in Pirkei Avot that goes like this. Turn the Torah over and over, for everything is in it. Look into it, grow old and worn over it. Never move away from it, for you will find no better portion than the Torah. Turn the Torah over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the reason why we turn the Torah over is because life comes from the Torah. We solve life's problems with the Torah. But it isn't just reading it alone, like going through your Bible alone. That isn't it. In Judaism, we read it with each other. And that's why we have the Chavruta Project with partners. That's why we meet on Sunday nights once a month to study together. That's why we read it here at services. And so we do this together. But more than just us coming together, as a local community, we read the Torah in light of how our Jewish community has read the Torah for generations and generations and generations to come and to past. So we're reading along with the sages and through their lens, and how did they see this? And then we come, it's like imagine a table, and we come in and we sit at this table with sages from, the early temple times, from Second Temple Judaism, from the 3rd and 4th centuries, from the medieval period, from today, and we join in their voices as part of the discussion. And that's how we read Torah as a people in Judaism today. And that's what Midrash is. Midrash is a unique kind of Torah commentary that's composed by ancient Jewish sages living in the 2nd and 3rd century in the exile. And it's a beautiful way of drawing out lessons in the text. So what we're going to do today is look at an interesting midrash called the magic arm, Pharaoh's daughter's magic arm. And we're going to ask this question: how does the magic arm of Pharaoh's daughter reach all the way to the beautiful birds of the air in the Sermon on the Mount? Okay. So let's get into our Parsha today. We read about how Pharaoh's decree to kill any boy child, throw them into the Nile River. Baby Moses is born, and his mother hides him for several months, and then she makes a basket out of reeds and patches it with tar, and she leaves baby Moses by the bank of the river in the reeds, where Pharaoh's daughter is going to come and where she'll bathe in the Nile. Moses' sister then hides in the background and watches to see what will happen. And let's read chapter 2, verse 5. Does anyone have a Bible there? Chaim, if you could run with the mic, because otherwise our Zoomers can't hear. Read just 2, verse 5 out loud, and we're going to study that.
Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe, while her maidens walked along the riverside. When she saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her handmaiden to fetch it.
Okay, so now there's this strange midrash. Get this. Rashi refers to this midrash, but it goes way back further on. And it says this. It says, no, that isn't what happened. Pharaoh's daughter didn't send her handmaid to go get the basket. Instead, the basket that was 30 yards away, her arm stretched miraculously and reached 30 yards, grabbed the basket, and brought it back. What do you think? A tall tale, huh? Okay. It's quite a story, the magic arm. Okay. Why would Rashi cite this again? Why wouldn't he say, this is just crazy? Well, it's a strange midrash. And, think about it. Think about how ridiculous that would be. It's like she's out there, she's looking, the basket's over there, and whoa, what happened to my arm? Kind of cool. So what do you think? Anyone want to take a stab at why this might actually have some meaning to it? Fred?
Maybe, to be kind to Rashi.
Yeah.
To intone that it was a miraculous event instead of an ordinary event.
Okay, it was a miraculous event instead of an ordinary event. Good. Okay, there's something there. Okay. Raina?
Well, again, I think it has a lot to do with the timing and the whole fact that Yocheved put the baby in a basket and put him in the river. Why would a river save her baby?
Right.
Why would putting him in the river, save him from death when they were being thrown into the Nile, to die? The basket isn't going to save the baby. So Yocheved must have had some kind of plan or some idea in mind. And then, so other midrashim I think that we hear is that she knew that the reeds where she placed him was intentional because she would have known that that's where Pharaoh's daughter, or where the Egyptians went to bathe. Mm-hmm. So maybe there was some intentionality behind it.
Yeah, maybe there's something deeper going on in the story. Now, I like to listen to Rabbi David Foreman with Olive Beta. He has some really cool ideas. And one of the ways that he helps us to understand Midrash, I think it's very helpful. If you imagine playing Happy Birthday on the piano, well, the right hand of Happy Birthday on the piano is the melody, Happy Birthday to you. It makes all kinds of sense by itself. Now, if you just were to play the harmony on the left hand by itself, it doesn't make any sense. What is that? This isn't even a melody. It doesn't make any sense. But when you put the harmony with the harmony draws out the beauty of the melody and enhances the melody. Does that make sense? So it's the same thing. Midrash is like this. The plain meaning of the text in Judaism is called the Pashat. This is what the text clearly says. It's the Pashat of the text. Okay, and that's the melody. It's the right hand of the text. Now, a Midrash comes in, and a Midrash is harmony. A Midrash says it doesn't make any sense by itself, but when you sync it up with the text, it draws something out of the text that we might not see otherwise. So let's look into the miracle of the magic arm. It all has to do with the Hebrew text. So, Vatishlach, and she sent, and then this word et amata, her handmaid, out to fetch the basket. But the problem is, and this is what Rashi picks up, is that amata has a homonym. Amma is from the elbow to the tip of the finger. And that's why a cubit is an amma, a cubit's length. So the sages look at this and say, wait a minute, maybe that's not handmade at all. Maybe it's she sent her hand all the way to the basket. So it is rooted in the text somewhere. Interesting. Okay, now, these people aren't ignorant, so let's discuss. Let's ask this question first as we begin to unpack this. Why do you think Pharaoh's daughter wanted to rescue Moses in the first place? Kevin, run around with the mic. Oh, thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. I'm guessing, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that she probably saw some sort of special thing about the child That's all I can make of that.
Yeah.
Something special in that she wanted to save him,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's all I come up with.
Something special about the child?
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve?
Just guessing maybe mother's instinct, it put on her heart seeing a crying baby.
Right. King of crying baby. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so she came down. Maybe she had this like instinct, like, wow, I just have to do something. Yeah. She doesn't have children, maybe. Maybe that's the case. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So it's really interesting because especially if you watch the movies, right, they all tend to portray Pharaoh's daughter as very much Egyptian and not really caring about the Hebrews at all, but that she maybe either had compassion on the child or she didn't have a child of her own, and for selfish interest, this was a way that she could kind of sneakily raise him as her own child. But the interesting thing is in Judaism, they see it very differently. In Judaism, the sages wonder if she was going down to the Nile because she was going to have a mikveh, go to the conversion to convert to Judaism. It's an interesting question. Why was she going down to the Nile to bathe? It's an interesting question. Maybe she was going to have a mikveh. Maybe she was converting to Judaism. The idea is that she wasn't like she was against her father's decree. She was rebelling against her father's house. She was for the Israelites. There was something in her. So when she saw this child, and compassion came over her, she brought this child in. And so if we look at the Parshat of the text, she sends her handmaid, her servant girl is what we'd say, to fetch the child. It's not a Gumby arm that stretches out, right? But something miraculous happens that's as miraculous as a growing arm is happening here because she's stretching beyond her natural reach. This is the daughter of Pharaoh. This is the daughter of the one who initiated genocide in the first place. She reaches outside of her own world. She reaches to pull a Hebrew child from death. She stretches beyond what she could stretch otherwise. So imagine you're the servant girl. Imagine that, Pharaoh's daughter comes and your job is to help her to succeed. And you go and she says, hey, go get that Hebrew child and bring him to me. And you say, what are you doing? There are consequences to your actions. You're Pharaoh's daughter. You can't do this. This is beyond your reach. It's not what's supposed to be. But she says, no, go anyway. And she goes and she gets the basket and brings it back. And then not only does she have compassion on the child and rescue the child, but she goes and she finds his mother to nurse him. And then she brings him up in the palace. And it's interesting. We wonder, did she know? How could she not know that this was the baby's mother? Of course she knew that this was the baby's mother. Miriam is right there to say, hey, should I go get someone to nurse? And she says, yes. And then this woman comes up and the baby knows the woman and she's crying. I mean, you can imagine, of course she knew. So our sages interpret she was trying to rescue this child and even to bring him up a Jew in the palace. It's a different way of looking at the story. Okay, now it's so interesting because we know that he was raised a Jew. Do you guys think he knew? How did he, Prince of Egypt makes it out he didn't know, but then he had this miraculous understanding, awakening, that happened when he was out there. But that isn't the text. The text just says he went out to go be with his brothers. Verse 11, now it happened in those days that Moses had grown up. He went out to be with his brothers and sisters, and he saw their burden. It doesn't say anything about whether he knew or not. And so our sages assume, of course he knew. He was raised because they have this different view of Pharaoh's daughter, that she actually raised him to be a Jew. Of course, the term Jew wasn't around then, to be a Hebrew in the palace. So it's interesting. Think of this. She raised a Hebrew man in the Egyptian palace that wanted to kill Jews, that wanted to kill him, that wanted to kill a deliverer. And not only did she raise a Hebrew man inside of the palace, but she raised the one who would deliver and draw Israel through the sea. She named him Draw Out because I drew him from the water, from his place of death. And then he goes and he draws Israel through the sea from their place of death and brings them into the promised land. So Pharaoh's daughter stretched beyond anything that was possible. So let me quote Rabbi David Foreman here, because he does such a good job with this, and I just wanted to quote him. He drives this home, this midrash home, and he says this: "Look what she was trying to do with this child. There are certain things you can do in life and certain things that are out of your reach. Ask yourself, when the daughter of Pharaoh saw Moses 30 yards away, was that child within her reach or was that child out of her reach? Physically, she could send her servant to fetch the child, but in every other way, that child is completely out of her reach. To bring that child up as a proud Jew in the palace is completely beyond her reach. You can't do that as the daughter of Pharaoh. But she reaches anyway. She reaches for that which is beyond her reach, and her arm stretches. Her reach extends beyond that which you could possibly achieve." And so when Rashi quotes the midrash of the magic arm, I don't think Rashi thought that it was literally what happened in the story, but Rashi is trying to highlight its harmony coming into the melody to say, look, there's something happening here that's amazing. And this midrash tells us of that, tells us of what's happening, and you have to link them together. And there's a lesson for us. When you see something that's out of your arm's reach, and you reach for it anyway, sometimes you find that your arm stretches. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the text. There's a secret to what makes a magic arm stretch. There's a formula. There's a secret. In our verse, let's see if you can find it. I'll read it again. "Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe, while her maidens walked along the riverside. When she saw the basket among the reeds, she sent her handmaiden or arm to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw a child, a baby boy was crying. She had compassion on him." This is one of the Hebrew children. What is the secret of the magic arm? Steve? Okay, curiosity. What does curiosity lead you to do? Right. She opened it, so there's curiosity. And when you're curious about something, what do? You go and see. You go and see. You look. You go and see. Yeah, that's exactly it. So she looked. She paid attention. And then what happened inside of her after that? Something happened. She looked and she had compassion. So what else happens in our Parsha that we only read part of it today, but the rest of the Parsha, what else happens that changes the course of history that first required looking and having compassion? Dave, did you have a comment? Yeah. I saw your hand go up. I don't know if that was an itch or if that was... You have a comment now.
I think this is what you're getting at. There's the companion moment is when Moses looks aside looks at the burning bush, and it's not like
Yes.
God was just happened to be hanging out in the burning bush that day and he got lucky. It says when God saw that Moses had turned aside to look at the bush, then he spoke to him.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And in the Midrashim and in the text, they say, like Rashi says, like fires could happen in the wilderness. That's not uncommon. But he had to look long enough to notice that it was a fire that wasn't consuming. He had to have curiosity and to go and to extend himself, to go and see. What other things required looking in the Parsha? There's a bunch of them. Stacy.
I was just thinking that even before Moses gets rescued out of the water by Pharaoh's daughter, the Parsha talks about the two Egyptian midwives who feared God, and they had compassion on, the mothers, and they saved all these babies at their own peril. And, when they were asked, well, why did you do that? They said, oh, well, the Hebrew women are so hardy, they give birth before we can get there. And I'm sure that wasn't the case, but
Right.
God bless them for what they did.
Yes, they had compassion. That's a good example. That's good. Any others? What about this one? It happened that Moses went out to be with his brothers and sisters, verse 11, and he looked and he saw their burden. Now that's very interesting because according to this understanding of Moses, he would have been with his brothers and sisters a lot of times. I mean, he would have grown up knowing these are my brothers and sisters. But this time he looked and he saw their burden. So he looked a little bit deeper here. What about when he sees the Egyptian abusing the Hebrew slave? He looks and he sees, he has compassion and he acts and he kills the Egyptian. So there's something that happens there. What about when he sees the two Hebrew men fighting? He looks and he sees, and then he's afraid and he runs. He acts and he goes to Midian, another event that happens. Ken, did you have a thought? Okay. And then, Dave, yeah. Andrew, give him the mic. Thanks.
That was fast. There's just another moment is when God looks and hears the groaning
Yes.
and sees, and God knew, that they were suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So it says, I have it here in verse 25, God looked and saw the suffering of Israel, and he had compassion on them. It's the same line, the same phrase. And what about when Moses is at the well? What did he do? He gets to Midian, he's at the well, and what does he see?
Shepherds harassing the daughters. Oh, sorry. The daughters who are trying to, feed their flock, and he stands up for them who are
Yeah.
being ousted by the shepherds.
That's exactly right. He sees injustice, and then he acts. He has compassion. So there's something about this looking and compassion. Now, compassion undergirds the whole story of God's redemptive plan for Israel, for our world. Pharaoh's daughter uses compassion to rescue a condemned Hebrew child against everything that Pharaoh wanted her to be. And so acts of compassion rescue the entire people, changes everything. Now, why is looking so important? You can have compassion, but why is looking so important? Let me share a rabbinic idea. This is from Isaac Luria. He says this: only one who can hear the cry of Moses, the infant, will be able to properly understand the words of Moses, the giver of the Torah. What do you make of that? Only one who can hear the cry of Moses is that's the one who can understand the Torah of Moses, the Bible. You have to be able to hear. You have to be able to see. You have to be able to look. You have to be able to engage. Only one like Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, think about that. Pharaoh's daughter. Only one like Pharaoh's daughter will actually be able to understand the Torah. It's remarkable. To hear Moses' cry, to stop and look, to have compassion, to act. That person is the one who understands the Torah. Okay, now let's reach all the way into our Besorah passage. Check this out. Matthew, and Yeshua says this in Matthew 6:25. Don't worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, or what you will wear. Isn't life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? So let's unpack this. Look at the birds of the air. What might this phrase mean? What might we add to this phrase if you were to look at it through the lens of the magic arm in this passage? Any ideas? Yeah. Yeah, don't worry. That's right. That's key. How many of you guys worry too much in life? Right? See, here's the thing. We hear this, and it sounds great, but how many of you feel like, well, I can't actually do that? I mean, can you actually just say, I'm not going to worry, and you don't worry? I mean, like, really? It's something that's totally out of our reach. It's 30 yards away. It's out of our reach. Don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you'll eat. Don't worry about being provided for. Who can do this? Even worse, think about the Galileans. I mean, they had nothing. These Galileans didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. They barely had one outfit of clothing to wear, let alone a closet full of clothes, the ones that you never wear, and then the ones that you sometimes wear, and then, you know what I mean? You have all these different things. They didn't have any of that stuff. And he says to them, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about clothing. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Instead, look to the birds of the air. Look to the birds of the air. So it's at the heart of Yeshua's message in the Sermon on the Mount. These corrupt Torah leaders, this is what's at the heart of this. The corrupt leaders in the temple in his day, this group, they knew the Torah laws. They knew them inside and out. They understood the outside of Moses, but they lacked something. They lacked compassion. They didn't look. They saw the people every day, but they didn't really look with compassion and see the burden that they placed on the people. These people were like Pharaoh. They carried their own anxieties. They carried their burdens about maintaining power, and they held their grasp. But Yeshua says, not you. You look to the birds of the air. You be different. Now, think about this. When you're anxious, what do you do? When you're anxious, what do you normally do or stop doing? Stop breathing. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, the cues of anxiety, you know. That's right. That's right. I don't know. For me, I go into go mode. So I start trying to fix problems or whatever, and moving from one thing to the next, or recycling different ideas about the future in my mind over and over again. But I don't look. I stop looking. When we're anxious, we go and look in this way, and we don't see outward. We only see inside of our own world. Everything feels out of my reach when I'm anxious. Everything is out of my reach. So when you're focused on your own problems, when you're focused on your own world, you never see. And you might miss Moses crying in his basket. You might miss the birds. So Yeshua tells us, there's no need to worry. Stop. Step outside of yourself. Look to the birds of the air. Notice their beauty. Then you'll have compassion, and you'll see what God is doing in the world around you. If he even clothes the birds, how much more so will he clothe you? And then we can stretch like Pharaoh's daughter. We can trust what we can't see. Even though it seems impossible, even though it seems out of our reach, God has a plan. And no matter what the situation is or how hard it seems, we can act. We can act in compassion, even though we can't see how the end will be, or we can't see how we'll ever reach that far, because God can reach that far. So with that, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Great study. Thank you for opening up this wonderful midrash. And let's close. I'm going to invite Shana to come forward, and why don't we rise for the Aleinu.